All right, it's a little chilly in here.
So, I tried to get a hold of me.
Okay.
But
Okay.
she said it was the mother of Jackie Solomon Smith.
Huh.
And that was, Jackie was Anna's full mom.
Okay. Okay. So we're on. All right. Welcome to anybody who's watching by way of YouTube today, and welcome to all who are here today. We are in our study of First Chronicles, that exciting book of the Bible that you've just been dying to get to all your life. You finally have gotten to it. I'm so excited for you. Really is a good book, and I hope that as we go through it, you'll come to appreciate its offerings to us in the church, life of the church, and in our understanding of the Bible. For those who are here, I've given you a map, and let me just say something about that. The map, obviously the Holy Land, we're talking about David, and we're going to be talking about Solomon, and we've talked about Saul a little bit. And so this map gives you, you can see how the kingdom, when it was united, how that played out. And so you see under Saul, it was a certain size. Under David, it was enlarged. And under Solomon, it was enlarged even further. This is the time period we're talking about, the United Kingdom, the time when the kingdom was, quote unquote, united, even as we are making the point that, well, it was never really truly and fully, completely united. The other thing that's good with this little map that I've given you is that it lays out the tribes, the 12 tribes of Judah. It lays out where their land was allotted to them. And so you match the colors with the tribes, and you find it there on the map, and so you can see. And so we're going to be talking today about how David drew warriors from all the different tribes along the way unto himself. And so you're going to see, when we talk about Gad, you're going to see that lavender color, Gad, there on the eastern side of the Jordan. And so when we talk about the Gadites, those are the soldiers who were from that tribe, and that's where their traditional territory was. And so you're going to see the reach of David's pull as he brings soldiers to him. The whole scope of this is that when David comes to the throne, as we've already talked about, it was contested at first by some of Saul's kin, and it was a gradual process, and there were always these tensions that underlay it. So this just gives you a sense for all those tribes in Israel, where they lived, where they resided, and how soldiers coming from them would have represented that area of Israel and would have helped to contribute to the sense of unity that David was trying to pull off as king of all Israel. We're still talking about warriors. We finished up talking about warriors last week and talking about the worth of warriors, and that point is driven home even further here. The theme of everything that we're talking about here is David uniting Israel under himself, and doing so through the military leadership of the various tribes. All of these, of course, would have been under Saul's purview when Saul was king. But as we're going to see, as Saul's days were waning, and as Saul was trying to get at David and trying to kill him, a lot of these warriors left Saul and came to David. Remember that David had been a chief commander, military warrior under Saul, and that one of the reasons Saul was suspicious of David was the fact that David had had great success. It's a double blessing. Well, it's a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. You have great military leadership. That's all fine and good and wonderful, but that means that they can also rise up and come after you as king if they get such an inclination. So trying to get power and trying to maintain power took a lot of energy, and because you have really expert military leadership, you always had to be careful that those under you weren't trying to take the kingdom away from you. And that's part of what David has to deal with all of his days. All right, let's read those first few verses. Each segment is going to talk about some of the warriors from Israel's army that defect from Saul and go to David. Most of this is taking place at the time, that latter period where Saul is still king, although he's a lame duck king. God has rejected him. But he's still king, and David is on the run because Saul is trying to kill him. And so it's during this time that a lot of these defections are taking place that we're going to be reading about. Verse 1, the following are those who came to David at Ziklag while he could not move about freely because of Saul, son of Kish. Again, Saul's trying to kill him, so David's having to live in hiding. They were among the mighty warriors who helped him in war. They were archers and could shoot arrows and sling stones with either the right hand or the left. That means they were really skillful warriors. They were Benjaminites, Saul's kindred. Remember, Saul is of the tribe of Benjamin. These are some of his fellow tribesmen. The chief was Ahiezer, then Joash, both sons of Shema of Gibeah, also Jeziel and Peleh, sons of Asmaveth, Beraku, Jehu of Anathoth, Ishmaiah of Gibeon, a warrior among the 30 and a leader over the 30, Jeremiah, Jehaziel, Johanan, Jozabad of Gederah, Eluzai, Jeremoth, Bealiah, Shemariah, Shephatiah, the Haruphite, Elkanah, Ishiah, Aziel, Joezer, and Jashobim, the Korahites, and Joelah and Zebediah, sons of Jeroham of Gedor. Thank you very much. This is why we haven't been doing all those lists of the genealogies, the generations. Whew. We're not going to do that again. Verse 1 references the time when David was on the run from Saul and in hiding. He is holed up in Ziklag, and Ziklag is a town on the border between Philistia and Judah. If you look on your map down there, you see Philistia, and you see Judah there. And so along the border, somewhere along that way, is where Ziklag was. David has come over to the Philistines in hiding from Saul. Smart move, right? You go hide among the people who is the biggest enemy of the king. And he's in a favorable relationship with the king of Philistia, though he does some fighting with him on some occasions for things, but he does not come against Saul and the people of Israel, especially at that one big battle where Saul dies. So David's in hiding, and he's trying to play both sides of the same coin. The people of the Philistines are suspicious of him. Is he trying to get a foothold so that he can, come in and work his way in and take over our country? But he's also on the side of the Philistines, which Saul says, "See, I told you he was a traitor." David's in Never Never Land, really and truly is. But he's holed up in Ziklag. He's not able to get out and get around much. He's got to be very careful because Saul is on the lookout for him. But as he is holed up, these warriors, these great warriors, start defecting to him. They're reading the signs of the times, and there's all sorts of gossip going on. They're having to hedge their bets. Okay, is Saul going to be king still, or is David going to be king? And which side do I want to be on when the final verdict is made? You got to make some decisions here. So for a host of reasons, some of these great warriors are siding up with David during these days. So we read first about the Benjaminites. The point of the chronicler, starting with them, is that, even Saul's own people recognized David and his leadership ability and his warrior mentality and his ability to lead Israel. And so David's already starting to draw some of the best warriors from Israel to himself, which is a sign of his rising star. As Saul's star is declining, David's is rising. And that's really kind of the point of the chronicler. Even those who belong to the same tribe as Saul were coming over to David at this point. There's a reference in there to the 30. You will see that in a couple of places in 2 Samuel or 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. The 30 is kind of like the Navy SEALs or the Army Rangers. Is that kind of elite corps, evidently, of soldiers who were especially skilled and who were very brave and who would sign up for the toughest, roughest assignments. We need not think that they are just 30 of them. Probably originally there was a group of 30. We need not think that it remained at 30 or that it was the same 30 all the time, or even that there was only one set of the 30. It could be that there were various groups of the 30. They were all of the same sort, but it wasn't the same group of the 30 here as over there. One of the reasons that we make that point here is because the reference to Ishmaiah of Gibeon, that's in verse 4. Ishmaiah of Gibeon, a warrior among the 30 and a leader over the 30. We don't see him when we see the 30 mentioned in 1 Samuel or 2 Samuel. We don't see his name in there. So that doesn't mean that there's, a problem here historically. It probably means that there were several groups of, quote unquote, the 30. In other words, the 30 is kind of the name of the elite corps, but there could have been one set of them here, one set of them here, and one set of them here. That's what that reference, the 30, has to do with. Again, this is emphasizing the fact of David's charisma and his character and his ability as a leader. And again, the military are the first ones that are going to know that, the political ebb and push and pull of political fortunes, they're the first ones to know, and they're going to be the first ones to figure out which side they need to be on. And so this is signaling that David's star again was rising, and for good reason, and that Saul's was declining. But we do see, again, as we just said a second ago, the precarious nature of being a king when you got all these great leaders, that are on your side right now. That's great, and that's fine, and that's good, but you always have to keep an eye out. You want to make sure that they remain loyal, especially when you've got these tribal allegiances playing out. Again, Israel is united or will be united under David, but it's always, kind of a slippery thing. Really, it's kind of like Civil War times. Robert E. Lee, which way would he choose to go when he was asked to be the commander of the Union forces? Does he side with his, does he go with his country? Well, of course, he said he couldn't because he was a Virginian and he could not turn against his own people. And so his loyalty to his own homeland, his own people, his own state, trumped his loyalty to the country. And it was a hard and terrible decision for him to make. But that's some of that's something that's at play here. You know, what's your first loyalty? And will that call you away from serving the king if you think somehow your first loyalty is being threatened? The dynamics that are underneath all this. We read this kind of at a surface level, but there are a whole lot of dynamics, very human dynamics that are at play here. And so David, again, David's life was a pretty hard one. If you read the book of Psalms and you read the Psalms of David, and I've mentioned Psalm 31 there as an example to look at. But if as you read through the Psalms and you hear David, I mean, he's always on the verge of some nation defeating him or somebody betraying him. David's life was a hard life. You know, he was in duress all throughout. You know, all the time up to when he became king, running away from Saul. And then after that, you know, dealing with all the enemies from within and without. Kind of reminds me of the Apostle Paul. Paul's life was a hard life. He was always struggling. You know, we like to think, oh, if you're successful, everything's going to go well and everything's going to be smooth and all this kind of stuff. No. If you're quote unquote successful, if you're normal, you're going to be fighting a whole lot of battles on the right and on the left. You know, always, there's something going on. And so, you know, David's life is really one we ought to focus more on and study and think about more, even as we do Paul's life. That's more the norm for Christian people. You know, it's all fine and good to be a Christian and to come to church and do all that kind of stuff, but you're fighting a whole lot of wars on a whole lot of fronts. And your faith helps you to wage those battles. But those battles also threaten your faithfulness to Christ. And so we're all under constant warfare. And that's not abnormal. That is normal in this fallen, broken world of ours. So if you ever get to feeling, you know, there's so much on my plate, what am I doing wrong? You know, why have I brought this on myself? That's the lay of the land in this fallen world. I mean, think again about David. You know, he had enough to deal with all the, you know, the soldiers under his command and the military leaders and all the enemies that he was dealing with. But then his home life, Absalom, and all that took place there, because he didn't act in a responsible way with something that had happened along the way in the family, Absalom rises up to try and take the kingdom away from him, his own son. Life is hard. The battles are constant. They never stop this side of eternity. Next section, there on page 2. From the Gadites, those people of Gad. I showed you where Gad is. And again, when you hear these names, the Benjaminites, you could see that little thin brown strip there just above the Dead Sea, I mean. That's the tribe of Benjamin had that portion. The Gadites are just up to the northwest of them, large territory there. The Gadites. From the Gadites, there went over to David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty and experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions and who were swift as gazelles on the mountains. And then you see all the names there. I'll let you read those on your own. Verse 14, these Gadites were officers of the army, the least of them equal to 100, and the greatest of them to 1,000. That is to say, each one of these guys was so expert and so good that the ones who were the least among this group were as good as 100 soldiers, and the ones who were best were as good as 1,000 soldiers in their worth. Verse 15, these are the men who crossed the Jordan in the first month when it was overflowing all its banks and put to flight all those in the valleys to the east and to the west. We don't know what that reference is, what that particular conflict was about. Obviously, if they lived on the Jordan, part of their military training, part of their need was to be expert in dealing with, water issues, fighting enemies there, the Jordan as your border. And so they were expert swimmers. And at some point, somewhere, these men crossed the Jordan in the first month. That's when the flooding, the Jordan would overflow its banks. There would be a time when it was very dangerous with the flooding and all. And they were able to traverse that to get to an enemy and to defeat them at some point somewhere along the way. So they were renowned, these Gadites, for their military prowess. And for them to have gone to David was for him to receive a great prize. But these were the kind of people who were coming to David. That's the point of the chronicler. He's getting the best of the best. He's not getting the leftovers. He's getting some of the best who are coming to him. And as they're coming to him, they are validating him as the new king. The reference to the stronghold there, I point you to 1 Samuel 24, verses 1 through 7. En Gedi is the name of this area, the wilderness encampment. If you read the whole of that story there in 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 7, that's one of those instances where Saul almost gets to David. He hears where David's encampment is. He hears that it's in En Gedi. And so he tries to a sneak attack on David. He actually shows up, and he's actually in a cave right near where David is. But he doesn't know it. But David finds out that Saul is there. David does not kill him as his soldiers were trying to get him to do. They're telling him, look, the Lord's delivered him right into your hands. But David would not kill Saul, even though Saul was trying to kill David, because David respected and reverenced the fact that Almighty God had appointed Saul to be king. And even if David knew at that point that Saul had been rejected by God, he said, it's not up to me to execute God's will here. God hadn't told him to do anything like that. And he was going to respect Saul's being God's anointed, appointed king. He would not go against God's work in the world, even in defense of his own life. A very godly man, David was. But anyway, that's where that encampment, that stronghold may have been. That's another place where David would have set up camp and would have built some fortifications of some sort. And so that seems to be what's being talked about here in this next section as well. Verse 16. Some Benjaminites and Judahites, again, you see where they are on the map, came to the stronghold to David. David went out to meet them and said to them, if you have come to me in friendship to help me, then my heart will be bound to you. But if you have come to betray me to my adversaries, though my hands have done no wrong, then may the God of our ancestors see and give judgment. Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, chief of the 30, and he said, we are yours, O David, and with you, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to the one who helps you, for your God is the one who helps you. Then David received them and made them officers of his troops. In this little episode, we see the chronicler gives us kind of an inside peek at how these things played out. I mean, all these other places, they're just talking about where these soldiers, these great warriors, came to David, signed up to be part of David's band, but we don't get any details. Here we get an inside peek at how it transpires. David's in a stronghold. Some Benjaminites and Judahites come to the stronghold. David, of course, is always wary of Saul and his men coming to him. He's got his spies out there, and he's hearing things, and he knows that Saul has his spies out there. Are these men spies, or are they sincere in their appeal to be in league with him? He's got to be very careful. And so he confronts them straight up and asks, which side are you on? Amasai, who is here, one of the leaders of the 30, one of the cohorts of the 30, and the text tells us that the Spirit comes upon Amasai. And so what we have is a song inspired by the Spirit of God, We are yours, O David, and we are with you, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, and peace to the one who helps you, for your God is the one who helps you. Here's a needed word that David receives at just the right moment. Again, David is always on the run. David is always anxious about who's trying to take him out. David's always suspicious of those who are eager to sign up with him. Are they part of Saul's troop? Are they spies? Are they meant to infiltrate and to destroy his army? But the response of Amasai is a song. We are yours. We are with you. Much more, we are here as a sign of God's presence with you. God is with you, and we are evidence of that fact. And so this becomes for David a moment of grace where God assures David of his presence and his desire to help him to persevere and to take the throne. Again, as we said on Sunday, when we talked about, God's actions in our lives, and how many times it takes a long period of time, and many times you come to the brink of destruction before God acts decisively. David's in the midst of all this turmoil, all this upheaval, all this struggle, but then God sends him this word in the midst of it to say, don't fret, don't give up, I am with you, I am with you. Next little section, beginning with verse 19. Some of the Manassites, tribes of Manasseh, deserted to David when he came with the Philistines for the battle against Saul. This is the epic battle against Saul. A couple weeks back when we started this study, we started in chapter 10. We started with the battle that Saul lost, Israel lost to the Philistines. Saul is killed in this battle. Some of the Manassites deserted to David when he came with the Philistines for the battle against Saul. Yet he did not help them, for the rulers of the Philistines took counsel and sent him away, saying, he will desert to his master Saul at the cost of our heads. They wouldn't let him fight. Not that David really wanted to fight. Of course, David again has to play both sides of the coin. And so they know that Saul is after David. And so David probably feigned allegiance to the Philistines. They were never really, they never really bought it, wisely so. So everybody's kind of playing an angle here. And so, but the Manassites desert to David at the time that this battle with the Philistines comes up. Verse 20, as he went to Ziklag, these Manassites deserted to him. And you see the names of them. Verse 21, they helped David against the band of raiders. We don't know the reference, or we don't know the exact story there. They helped David against the band of raiders, for they were all warriors and commanders in the army. Indeed, from day to day, people kept coming to David to help him until there was a great army, like an army of God. Chronicler's making the point. All these stories I've been telling you, it just kept happening and kept happening and kept happening. The groundswell for David just kept taking place. And so the picture emerging here is that David is kind of swept to victory as Israel's king. Even as Saul's trying to kill him, he's being swept up and swept along to be made king by the people. And that's really the point of the chronicler. The people are the one who make David king. Again, in 1 Samuel, we see that one of Saul's sons is raised up to take the throne after Saul dies. And so there's a battle between that son and David. And in that telling of the story, the armies of Israel are lined up against David's armies. And so it's a different picture than what we have here. What the chronicler is telling us is that there was this spontaneous coming together of people around David. And it took place while Saul was trying to kill him. And it will culminate in this last part of chapter 12, where all the soldiers come to Hebron, where David is anointed king. One of the things to take note of here, these reports of David's assembling a mighty army as he made his way to the throne. This story is important for us to keep in mind, especially when we think about Jesus and his messiahship. You know that the people of Israel in the days of Jesus, they expected a Messiah to come, and they expected the same kind of Messiah that David was. So you see here how David is growing his army and getting all these people to come under him, and they're all skilled warriors, and that's exactly what you want. The guy with the strongest army is the one who's going to win. And if you're going to throw the Romans off of Israel in the days of Jesus, then you need a David-like character who's amassing this army of skilled warriors to throw off the Romans. And that was the problem, one of the problems for Jesus. He wasn't that kind of Messiah. Now we can appreciate why the people of Israel expected that kind of Messiah. But of course, Jesus wasn't coming to throw the Romans off. He was coming to throw Satan off the throne. And so Jesus' messiahship, his kingship, was not of this world, but of the universe. And he came not to throw Caesar off the throne. He came to throw Satan off the throne. And so this was a sticking point for Jesus. It was one of the reasons why some did not sign on with Jesus. And it's one of the reasons why they mocked Jesus. He's the Messiah. He died on the cross. He was rejected by everybody. He's a fool. And it doesn't look any better when you think of his army that he's assembled, right? Those 12 disciples and all those other poor people, unimpressive folks, fishermen, really? They're going to lead you into battle? You get a sense for how, how hard it was, number one, to believe in Jesus for the average Jewish person in those days. How necessary it was for Jesus to do those mighty deeds of power to try and break through. But yeah, I mean, when we say that they expected a military leader, you see what kind of military leader they were thinking of. David. This kind of thing that he was doing in his days. It would have been hard to be a good, faithful Jew and to hear that Jesus was Messiah and to try to figure out how to make sense of that with the crowd he was drawing to himself and with the things he was preaching and teaching. Last section of the chapter, beginning verse 23. These are the numbers of the divisions of the armed troops who came to David in Hebron to turn the kingdom of Saul over to him according to the word of the Lord. The people of Judah bearing shield and spear numbered 6,800 armed troops. Of the Simeonites, mighty warriors, 7,100. Of the Levites, 4,600. Jehoiada, leader of the house of Aaron, and with him 3,700. Zadok, a young warrior, and 22 commanders from his own ancestral house. Of the Benjaminites, the kindred of Saul, 3,000, of whom the majority had continued to keep their allegiance to the house of Saul. Of the Ephraimites, 20,800 mighty warriors, notables in their ancestral houses. Of the half tribe of Manasseh, 18,000 who were expressly named to come and make David king. Of Issachar, those who had understanding of the times to know that what Israel ought to do, 200 chiefs and all their kindred under their command. Of Zebulun, 50,000 seasoned troops equipped for battle with the weapons of war to help David with singleness of purpose. Of Naphtali, 1,000 commanders with whom there were 37,000 armed with shield and spear. Of the Danites, 28,600 equipped for battle. Of Asher, 40,000 seasoned troops ready for battle. Of the Reubenites and Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh from beyond the Jordan, 120,000 armed with all the weapons of war. Painting a big picture here. David really has amassed a great army. And all of this from the time when Saul was coming after him. So verse 38, all these warriors arrayed in battle order came to Hebron with full intent to make David king over all Israel. Likewise, all the rest of Israel were of a single mind to make David king. They were there with David for 3 days, eating and drinking, for their kindred had provided for them, and also their neighbors from as far away as Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali came bringing food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen, abundant provisions of meal, cakes of figs, clusters of raisins, wine, oil, oxen, and sheep, for there was joy in Israel. This is about David's coronation. And so there's this massive army that shows up. What a show, right? We are all behind you. The best of Israel is now behind you. And they bring all this food for feasting. And for 3 days, they celebrate David's being made king. This is the chronicler's take on things. This is his story to tell. And he's making the point that under David, Israel came together really and truly. Historians will debate this back and forth and say that this is an idealized, puffed up kind of version of things. And again, when you compare it to 1 Samuel, there's a different tone to both of them. Can both be right? Well, you pick any time in America's history and any leader in America's history. And on the one side will be those who think this one was sent by God and is doing great things. And there'll be others on the other side saying this one is the son of Satan and he has come to do horrible things. Depends on who you talk to, right? Well, there's some of that going on here, I believe. But the chronicler is making the point that under David, Israel, really was set and primed to be a united kingdom. And the fact is they were. Under David, Israel, in a sense, reached its peak of glory. It was at its height under David. Again, that wasn't easy, and there were always fissures in the foundation. There were always people trying to undermine things and take over things. It's never easy holding things together, and under Solomon, they fall apart. It's not united for long, but it is united under David. The chronicler is pushing that point, which needs to be made. Under David, God united Israel. God did an amazing thing, a miraculous thing. And it really did take place. The last thing to think about with all this, that scene of the coronation of David really has messianic overtones, really has end times overtones. Remember, I told you on Sunday that whenever you see those words 3 days in the Bible, think of Jesus and his coronation. Jesus' coronation took place on the 3rd day. He died on the cross, was buried, was raised from the dead by the Father, and eventually ascended up to the heavenly throne room. It was on the 3rd day that he was made king. It was on the 3rd day that he defeated Satan, that his defeat of Satan was made known and was validated for all the world by God's raising him from the dead. The 3rd day, Jesus was made king over all things. It parallels David's story here. Plus, what is the great anticipation for the followers of Jesus Christ for the last time? There will be that great banquet day when the kingdom is brought in and all the saints are brought in, and those who have gone before and those who are coming to the table now are all united around the table, and all our loved ones who have gone before us, and we will see them there, and we will feast with Christ in the everlasting kingdom of righteousness and peace. That's prefigured in this story, I think. And so this grand coming together and celebrating the beginning of David's reign, that's what's going to happen on the day when Christ brings us into the kingdom. There will be a grand banquet that will never end, where we will celebrate Christ as king over all things forever and ever and ever and ever. See, there's good stuff here, I'll tell you. Thoughts, questions, comments? Both things happened in one day? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That one climactic act on that one particular day. I knew you want to preach. Good stuff, really good stuff here. We're going to keep going next week, picking up with chapter 13. Again, this is good review of history that you already know and helping to fill in the history that you don't know. And we all need to know more about this history of Israel than we know now. Yes, Debbie? That's all. All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks to anybody and everybody who's watching on YouTube today. We're glad that